All right, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. So I've got an update to the Bullszat deck, and then I also wanted to explain one thing about why I haven't been able to make recordings lately, or haven't made recordings. It's this problem here. As you can see, sorry my neighbors, I'm in Hawaii, people like to light fireworks, so it's gonna get a little loud if you heard that, but I have this problem where every time I log off Magic, if I restart my computer, it completely uninstalls itself, and I have to reinstall it, and then all of my history, all my rich history of all the games that I was saving and planning to record and stuff, completely wiped out. Even my settings are wiped out. I have actually taken advantage of this export-import feature that the company added, where you can export your settings, and then you can import them to mostly set up Magic Online. There's a couple settings that it doesn't actually remember. But and then you have to do those manually, so it's a huge pain for me to play, so I really haven't played much lately. And then it's an incredibly a much greater inconvenience to record post facto, as I usually do, because as you can see, my games get wiped, so I have to do it in the moment. So anyway, the deck that we're going to take a look at today is the Bullszat deck. There have been very small adjustments. The deck is such a fine-tuned engine. You have to be very cautious about making any big changes. I would say that because I've taken a break for a little while and then come back to it, that I've got some cards on my radar potentially to be cut if I can find better cards, but I don't know that they're kind of in my list of things that the maybes, I guess. How do I put this? There's cards that when I'm playing, I know for a fact that these cards are simply never going to be cut. You're never going to cut Soul Ring, right? But other than the super obvious ones like that, there's others that fall into that category specific to each deck. And in the Bullszat deck, one example would be like Culling the Weak. It's one of the best cards in the whole deck. It's definitely never going to be cut. Trying to think of other examples like that. But Death Cloud's an example of a card that this deck will never cut. However, not every black deck will run it, right? So it's not an obvious include for every deck. So when you strip out all the list of things that you might cut, and you look at, or that you would not cut, between the things that nobody should ever pull from their deck, and then the things that your deck specifically should never lose, for this reason or that, for example, because of the format, you can't afford to cut like Shattering Spree or something. But anyway, the list of flex slots gets really small, and in this deck, that list is extremely small. And the tighter the deck list, the smaller it gets. Sometimes you get to a point where the only time you make changes are when they just print a better card. Like, let's say they, take a Braid, right? Let's say that they printed a version of a Braid that costs 1 red and 1 Phyrexian mana. And so you could pay 2 life to pay for the colorless portion of the card. Then maybe we would add that card to the deck, but then again, maybe we would just upgrade the Abrade that's in the deck, stuff like that. So at any rate, there is, however, a card from the new set that I believe is probably going to stay in the deck, which is pretty exciting because that's tough to find. I mean, even the lovely orcish, whatever their name is, the orcs from Lord of the Rings. Let's see here. Orcish, I'm searching, Bowmasters. Even the lovely orcish Bowmasters and orcish Settlers from Weatherlight, 2 of my favorite orcs in Magic. Both of those have not made the cut long term, at least for now. Part of the reason is that Bowmasters is backbreaking in formats where people are running like 4 Brainstorms, and extremely good when they're at 20 life and you can pressure them down and finish them off very quickly. And people are playing a lot of tempo-based games, and they have a lot of targets. And pretty much none of that really applies to Commander. Yes, people run a lot of cantrips when they can, but not everybody can. And they're only running 1 copy of any given cantrip, like Brainstorm, for example, in their 100-card deck. And then on top of all that, 40 life means that It's very slow to kill somebody with the Orcish Bowmaster, relatively speaking. And if there aren't an abundance of targets, then it just doesn't make sense to run the card. And my current conclusion is that there just aren't enough targets for the card. That may change, but there's an example of a card that was in a flex slot that has been in and out. Now, a card that I think will probably stay is this card. This card is super broken, and if anyone's been following Legacy or Vintage, they've seen that this card is completely dominating those formats to a degree, or if not dominating, then it's certainly making a huge splash, let's say. But Beseech the Mirror. So the way this card works is it's 4 mana Demonic Tutor. However, if you sacrifice a creature or artifact when you as part of the bargain price, I guess that's on resolution, which is different from kicker, which is on cast. So it's on resolution, which means that your opponent has to allow you, they can't wait to see if you bargain to counter it. I believe, someone can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I think that's how it works. So anyway, if you pay the bargain, then instead of a 4 mana Demonic Tutor, which is fairly poor, what you have is a 4 mana Demonic Tutor for anything that costs 4 or less that you can then cast for 0. And that's extraordinarily powerful when you have targets like this. So when you can just beseech into like Karn or Necro or a giant mana ramp with Thran Dynamo, or you can beseech into like a lock piece like Winter Orb, or you can wipe their board like Toxic Deluge, or you can recover with like a Yogwill, for example. Card's just really, really amazingly good for things like that. And so with that in mind, I think the card will probably stay because we have Rogra that we can sacrifice to it. We also frequently have artifacts that we can sacrifice to it without much of an issue. We have treasure tokens in fair abundance. We'll have tap mana vaults. We'll have a mana crypt that's dealing a little too much damage to us, or a one ring with just a few too many counters on it. So there's a lot of good things that we can do there. And basically we have Tevish Zat tokens. So it's essentially just it's basically 4 mana to cast a card in your deck that costs 4 or less, and Demonic Tutor it for 0, if you think about it, right? Because this card still would have cost me 4 mana, but I just Beseech the Mirrored, so I paid 4 mana for a 4 mana card, and 0 mana for a Demonic Tutor. I just sacked, a creature, something extra that I don't need. So, pretty awesome card, and I think it's a pretty good fit for this deck. It works very well in Control. Of course, something has to budge when you make cuts, so at present, I currently do not have Ugin. Excuse me. And I think that's okay. The card is very, very good, obviously, once you can get it down. Provides a lot of mana, does a lot of good things, but not necessarily a card you want to see in your opening hand. You're far happier to see Beseech the Mirror in your opening hand, simply because, with Rog and 4 mana, you could potentially just slam a Necro or whatever, like I was saying. And maybe you can't get to 5 mana for Tevish for whatever reason. Maybe your hand doesn't get there. Heck, maybe you just go first turn, like, Calling the Weak and throw down a Chrome Mox with no imprint or whatever, and then Beseech, or a Mox Opal with, you don't even have 4 artifacts. Remember, if you were to sack your Rog to Calling the Weak, you could not Beseech and pay the bargain unless you had like a 0-drop to go with it. But we have 6 of them, so it's not impossible. More than likely, it's a turn 2 play. But anyway, I think that at some point, like, something has to budge, and when you're cutting a 6 mana card for a 4 mana card, you're usually like going in the right direction. You typically want to push your casting costs down, not up. The other cut that I had to make, and this one I don't know about for sure, but I currently took out Dreadbore, and I'm running Feed the Swarm because now without Ugin, this is the only enchantment removal I have outside of a Liquid Metal Torque combo with something like an Abrade. So I do like having the Feed the Swarm as an enchantment removal spell. So I cut the Dread for Feed the Swarm, and then I also have one other land in here, and I don't remember what the cut was for it, but basically I am running, this is a card that you may have seen in a video with Brian Weissman on his channel, Westvale Abbey. It's a card that we were testing for a little while. It seems to be doing well in testing. It seems like such a Johnny card or a Timmy card. It seems like such a, like, I don't know, paying 5 life and sacking 5 creatures to do this thing. 5 mana and 5 creatures. When you have to pay 5 mana and tap it to make a 1/1 and pay a life. So if you were to flip this the way that the card actually allows you to, you would spend 5 mana and 1 life 5 times. So 25 mana plus the Abbey itself, so 30 mana. 30 mana to make 5 1/1s, and then you would have to spend 6 more, so 36 mana to flip it. That's not a good card. But the card is a land, which is, it's always good. It's a very low cost to include it in the deck. And we have a 0-drop and a commander who at 5 will spit out 1/1 tokens that we don't mind getting rid of, as well as a few other ways to make tokens like Doretti and such. And in that context, the ability to spend, like, just slam this land down, it's uncounterable. You have a board with 4 Tevish tokens and a Rog, and your opponent has removed everything else and just left you with that, and they're sitting there with like a counter spell waiting to counter your next play of Tevish, and you just slam this thing down, make a 9/5 flying lifelink indestructible haste. Pretty awesome, actually. Of course, you can make 1/1s with it and like clamp them or something, but that's, or 1/1, I don't know, Jitte, to wear a Jitte or something. But again, you're getting into the far-fetched realm. It's not impossible, but typically not why we're running it. But a 9/5 flying lifelink indestructible haste is something that kills planeswalkers very well, and also does something this deck needs, which is recovers life. And currently the only life gain in the deck was the Umezawa's Jitte. So now we have 2 life gain sources for long games of attrition, where sometimes it really does come down to, you're down to, I've finished games at 1 life with this deck, right? And yeah, I won, but I would have very much liked to have had a way to get higher than 1 in that game, right? This gives you a way, and it's also something that you can recur with the Crucible, or replay with like a Yogg-Will pretty easily, and set up for, a turn or 2 later, so that you can go ahead and get it out. So it's it's easier for them to permanently answer a Jitte than it is for them to permanently answer this thing, potentially, in a long grindy game. So those are the changes, and I figure I will run through the deck list. And I apologize, I'm having some issues with my allergies right now. So these are the only 4 games I've got, so I'll run through this first one. This was against Blood Baron. I think Blood Baron, I think what happened is my start was essentially like a checkmate for my opponent's start, so he showed me that there was no out for him, and then he just conceded. I'll just play it, just so you can see. So it is interesting, though, actually, in one regard. So this is what my opening hand looked like. And I guess the question is, how would you execute this hand, right? And my opponent's commander is, he's playing the combo deck. So how do you navigate this hand correctly? I'm going first, by the way. What I decided was I wanted to set up for a potential turn 2 Tevish, and I wanted to get Opposition Agent ready to flash out, or have a Braid ready, so that I could disrupt at the end of my opponent's turn or in response to a fetch, and then follow up with Tevish, and then I'm ahead in tempo enough and start drawing cards, and I should be able to win from there. Unless I just get comboed out with, like I said, Dassa's Oracle. So that was my thinking, but the more I thought about it, there was no way that I could see to accomplish all of that exactly the way I wanted to, by sitting there and then flashing an Opposition Agent out in response to a fetch. So my second thought was, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to develop and set myself up for a turn 2 Tevish, but I want to get Opposition Agent on the board now, and while I can't trick them into walking into it with their fetch land, I will at least punish them if they kept a hand that relies on them. So, do you see a way to get way to potentially have 5 mana on turn 2 and get Opposition Agent to play this turn? And I'll give you a moment to think about it, and if not, we'll go ahead and you can pause and work through it, but I'm going to go ahead and proceed. So this is the way I manage that. I turn 1 Mana Crypt, Mox, Pitch to City, Demonic Tutor. I've got 1 mana floating. Remember, my goal here is to cast Opposition Agent. So I can't get Chrome Mox or Mox Opal here. I'll be 1 short. I can't get Dark Ritual because I only have colorless. I can't get Jeweled Lotus because I'm 1 short of playing Tevish now, and it won't cast Opposition Agent. So what do you get here? Well, here's how I managed it. Tower. Get the Phyrexian Tower, sack the Rog, boom, Opposition Agent. Congrats to you if you figured that one out. And as you can see, I was very fortunate. He basically, you see his hand was Flooded Strand. I guess I don't know why it actually reveals his hand here. And I mean, you can see, you know, what he's playing with here is just a pure. This is just the pure Thassa's Oracle combo / Wheel of Fortune Breach nonsense. This is the draw 7 deck, you know. It just abuses draw 7s and all that business. But I guess he did have Crypt, Gemstone Mine, Springleaf Drum, Channeler. So it's possible here that he just made a mistake and shame conceded. Or maybe he just didn't want to deal with the card. But given that he's holding a Deadly Rollick here, if this was truly his hand, he probably would have played his Rog and then Rollick my guy and then fetched. And then played Dragon Ray Channeler or something like that. And actually probably played Drum, tapped it, used it for Channeler. Yeah, he could have like gone off here. So what I'm guessing is that more than likely he either made a mistake or this isn't actually what was in his hand, and we can kind of disregard that. But this is how it worked out. I saw that he didn't have a Badlands, so I took Underground instead. And then he's conceded to that. All right, so we move on, and I think he logged out. So against here, Converted Mana Cost, Louisiana State University. I don't know. This could, if you read the name in a slightly different order, it could be something quite dirty, actually. But we'll go with Converted Mana Cost, Louisiana State University. My assumption of what that person's name is. Anyway, they're playing Winota. I think this is another like super toxic commander because if you have any creatures in play and you just attack with this thing, basically the game ends. It's just utterly dumb. It's kind of like the problem with the red, blue, white one that is very similar, where if you just attack with it, you win the game because you flip up a bunch of time walks and stuff, except with this, you just flip up a bunch of active aggression and completely blow your opponent out. It's about as dumb as most of the stuff that's in the format right now. I just wish the dumb stuff cost more than 4 mana. I feel like 4 mana is too low for most like commanders that like Minsk and Boo and this Winota and basically anything that has that heavy of an impact where the game probably ends if you can play it should cost more than 4. And the reason 4 is the cutoff is because, at least in my view, is because of Gilded Lotus. Because land Gilded Lotus means you get to play your commander on turn 1 and basically the game ends for most opponents, and I don't like that. I think that sure, if it's like Ancient Tomb Gilded Lotus, but that's kind of like a nut draw, right, for a 5-drop. I feel like 4 really needs to be the cutoff in the format because of Lotus and LED and stuff like that, but I digress. So anyway, I'm going first, and yeah, I'm definitely going to keep this. Turn 1 Necro, refill, and then try to make sure that I can disrupt. Sounds good to me. So we'll go ahead and get a Badlands here so that I don't Necro into the thing that I would have, like if I used Swamp Dark Ritual, whatever, and then maybe next turn I need to play a second red source and like a Mana Crypt and I cast Shatter Skull, I would feel pretty dumb not fetching the Badlands there. And I'm going to over Necro a bit here and just try to craft a hand. So I get this. And having used a ritual and getting Necro out already, I don't need Ad Nauseam, so I'm going to pitch that. So we'll look at what I exile here as I discard, because I have 10 cards in hand, so I over Necroed. So I'm gonna exile Ad Nauseam. I chose to go ahead and get rid of Imperial Seal. I can just draw multiple cards. I've got tons of interaction now, so I don't really need to like tutor for anything specific. I just need to play my cards, you know, dump my hand, refill my hand, dump my hand, refill my hand. So wasting time on a tutor that cost me 3 life to get the card because the Necro didn't seem great. And I just threw away one of my lands. I threw away the Swamp. I'll keep the Sulphurous in case my opponent does like first turn Strip Mine or something. I might like to have kept a red mana. Instead, first turn Deafening Silence. It's actually really frustrating for Necropotents to be facing, but fortunately, well, first of all, I went first. The big value of Necro is being able to play multiple cards in a turn, and I no longer have that value. So I'll just Necro for a bit. No over Necroing there for now. Turn 2, Esper Sentinel. Miss a land drop is a big flag. So I thought about tutoring here for Strip Mine potentially. It's pretty hard to really, like, I'm not 100% sure that that's correct. I decided what I'd rather do is just develop, and then I can get around to doing that soon enough anyway. Oh, I didn't have the tutor yet. Sorry, I guess I'm telegraphing. So anyway, I'm going to focus on development right now. Yeah, there's the tutor. Opponent misses another land drop. And I think you can see where this is going. But I go ahead and throw away a Toxic Deluge here. It doesn't look like I'm going to need to Deluge against this board. I've got lots of removal for single targets. My opponent's mana screwed, so they're not going to be dumping a ton of things into play. And just going to go ahead and get Liliana down here. We'll nuke that Sentinel that's kind of annoying. Mostly Deafening Silence is the annoyance, but what can you do? Anyway, at this point in the game, with a Liliana running and a Necro and all this, my opponent wisely concedes. So that is fine, and then jumps right back into it. And then the third game is the most interesting one. But I figured I'd save the best for last. Once again with Winota, and I've got to turn 1 Necro again if I want it. I'm going first too, but I don't want to play turn 1 Necro. What I want to do is play turn 1 Rag. Then if my opponent wastelands me, I attack with Rag, get a token, and then Necro, Ritual Necro. If they kill the Rag, like turn 1 Bolt or Swords, then I play the Shop, Ritual Necro. But that gives me the possibility of drawing something even better that I can... Like, imagine if I drew a Gilded Lotus and I could Ritual Lotus, you know, Ritual Workshop Lotus Necro, something like that, right? So I'm going to, because I'm going first, I'm going to go ahead and lead off with the Rag. Go ahead and play the Rag and Rog. And my opponent plays the white version of Ragavan, which is basically the 1-drop that an entire game is often defined by. Like, the whole game is now a game of, can you deal with my Ascendant? Can you deal with my Rag, right? Like, the whole game is warped and revolved around these 2 single pip cards. And I'm very fortunate here in that I draw a command tower. And I was thinking about my options here. An interesting play actually is Dark Ritual Deathcloud for 1, sacking Rog, pitching whatever, maybe, I don't know, maybe the Workshop would probably be the safest card, but probably the Pact. Anyway, and then what happens is I kill my opponent's land and creature and a card from their hand, hit them with Ragavan, and get a second black mana, so that on the next turn I can hit them again, potentially, and get my 3rd black mana and play my Necropotence anyway. And if they deal with Ragavan from there, I would have a if I kept my Shop, I would have the ability to possibly top deck like a big mana source or do something with that. So that may have been correct, but I decided I was going to play a little differently. I'm going to take advantage of this Pact here, because what I realize is if I can connect without sacking the land, if I can kill this now, then I'll get a black source and I'll have 3 black. My opponent's going to have to deal with Ragavan, and then I'll just have 3 back and I'll hardcast Necro. So I decided to go that route. So first I tapped the tower and then realized, wait, I might get a black-red removal spell. So, oh yeah. Now I want to indicate here, this is a big mistake playing the land first. If I was going to make this play, I should have held the land, ritualed, and then played the pact with 1 black floating, because there's a chance that one of the cards that I hit might be an artifact that I want to play off the workshop. Anyway, you're going to see a very painful turn here. Here's me wishing I had that Dreadbore just because of, well, you'll see. So these are the cards getting exiled, offered, and passed up on. And I'm going to go through it a little quick. It is pretty gnarly, pretty painful too. But it takes, look at all those beautiful, beautiful cards, right? There goes my Strip Mine, no Strip Mine lock from my opponent. There goes Beseech. There goes my Jewel Lotus. And then finally, so 47 cards, 48 cards down, I finally find removal. I only have 40 cards left in my library now at this point. And I connect with Rag. I exile one of their lands, as it turns out, and I get a treasure. So I'm set up for Necro next turn. And I've also got Ragavan pressuring them. Had. That gets abraded. Fair enough. Alright. So I'm going to actually slam the Mount Doom and save myself the treasure. I'm willing to pay a life for an extra mana next turn. So I'm going to over Necro. Now look, I have to be really careful. I only have 35 cards left. And none of these cards are available to me. Well, those upside down ones are. You can see. But is my Karn gone? I was looking. Yep, Karn's gone, so I'm not going to be able to get back any of these artifacts from the exile zone. Excuse me with the hiccups. What else is gone? Jete and both Jete and Abbey. So I have no more life gain in the deck, so I have to be cautious about that as I'm necroing. What else? Hatred, combo kill is gone. Will not, so I can't, recoup this. For the most part, I guess I'm mostly okay. It's a lot of mana sources though. Ad nauseum I'm okay with. A lot of mana sources which would interact favorably with the workshop. All gone. Winter Orb is gone, so that lock is out. But I still have the Cloud in my hand. But if I blow the Cloud, then I won't have any permanent lockdown for their mana. Potentially. All right. So for my opponent's turn, Eidolon of Rhetoric comes down. Another just F you to Necropotence. It's geez, how frustrating. All right. Well, I mean, Necro is still Necro though. I'm gonna play. So I've got to. This time I'm actually going to use my Imperial Seal, and I look. First of all, I checked to make sure I still had a Swamp to fetch before I fetched, because if I actually exiled Swamp Mountain, there would have been nothing to target with that. So thankfully, I didn't exile my 3 basics. I had at least one. And then after that, I decided I'm an Imperial Seal. Now remember, I can go get, this is all that's left in my deck. So with this in mind, what do you think? Where do you think my head's at? What am I going to go get here? So what I decide to do is I go get, I necro for 2 here. I over necro just a bit. Oh no, exactly enough. I go get Deadly Rollick, and the reason I got Rollick is that I have to worry about him playing a land and playing his commander and then swinging for the fences. And if I get a sorcery speed removal spell, I can't play it, even if I could get it in my hand. Even because of I can only play 1 spell per turn. It has to be an instant. And I definitely don't want to go get Fire Covenant, which is still in the deck. But I definitely don't want to get Fire Covenant. I mean, I suppose I could have in order to pay 4 and then 8 life here potentially. But it seems pretty risky. So I got Rollick because now what I can do if my opponent, especially if he wastelands me, I can... what I'm hoping is he plays a fetch or something. And then I can flash in Opposition Agent. Well, correction. I can Deadly Rollick the Eidolon and then flash the agent all in response to his fetch land. So that's kind of the play I'm hoping gets to happen here. Opponent just goes straight for the Wasteland, so I'm going to go ahead and just exile here. I'm really, really hoping he doesn't have Mana Crypt, because if he has a Mana Crypt here, I just opened the door to him going Mana Crypt Winota, when previously he could not, because each player can cast no more than one spell per turn. Or Ancient Tomb would be even worse. Well, not worse, but would be the same result. Or Lotus, I suppose. Instead he's got Dockside, which I'm not pleased to see, but alright. And then Strip Mine. It's so punishing. This turn is just so harsh, right? I only have so much mana. Like, how am I gonna now he's threatening to play Winota off of this 4 mana, attack with that thing, trigger the Winota, and then probably win the game, right? Because I'm running out of life total, I'm running out of resources, I'm running out of mana. So I have to make a desperation play here, so I do. I make the play I considered much earlier in this game when facing the Serra Ascendant, and I Death Cloud for 1. And this will kill Rog, and I'll kill probably my Mount Doom, since it always costs me a life to tap, where this one doesn't. I'll take a card out of their hand. They're down to 2, so this is half my opponent's hand for a third of mine. And I'm going to take away one of their lands, and maybe they'll miss a land drop next turn. But more importantly, it does buy me time. If they don't miss a land drop and play Winota, they're not swinging with anything else. So I'm going to get to refill my hand with the Necro, and then I'll get another possibility of like stopping this before it triggers. You just cannot let Winota trigger. So I throw away Jessica's Will, because getting red for each card in my opponent's hand when they have 1 card in hand is not something that I am really in the market for. Not at the cost of paying 3 mana. So I'm going to Necro up. I've got this Workshop just waiting to find some artifacts. And I'm going to attack with Opposition Agent. Here, I feel it's pretty safe. If you had some kind of flash creature and traded, I would be over the moon, because then they would be a mile, like a year away from playing the Winota, barring a Lotus, which is always a threat, of course. But then if they were to trade, I mean, there's a couple of white creatures that are flashed at Grizzly Bears. But anyway, fortunately it doesn't happen. I over Necro here, and now I just want to keep a little bit of removal, a little bit of disruption, and I'm going to have to figure out what I need to throw away. I'm going to throw away Thoughtseize, because, so let's take a look at what I discard, but one of the cards is going to be Thoughtseize, because I don't need it too much when my opponent's so low on cards, even though it is like half their hand. We've shifted gears into the mana denial phase, rather than the hand disruption phase, which is only there to buy time for the mana denial phase most of the time. So Thoughtseize is going to go. Also paying 2 life when I have Necro out is getting pretty important right now. I'm going to throw a Skull Clamp, because I have Necro. I don't particularly need it. I'm going to throw a Mountain, because my next turn I intend to play a Workshop, I think. I may hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, what I'm going to throw away here is Diabolic Intent. I don't have Rog to play cheaply and easily off of it. I don't want to sack the Opposition Agent, because it may be pinning my opponent down from mana. And I don't really need to tutor from this tiny deck of 24 cards when I can Necro most of it into my hand anyway. So I'm going to actually throw away that. So those are the cards that I chose. So those 3 will make their way into the exile zone. And this means that next turn I can go like Lan Laelia, and then I can follow it up with a Workshop GPS. But if my opponent does play Winota, I can go the next turn I can go Lan, like Feed the Swarm. So let's see what happens. My opponent plays Ancient Tomb. So rough. Now they're 1 mana off from playing Winota, even if they sack, like to get some creatures in play. And my opponent decides that what they want to do is exactly that. They can get a creature in play and like set the stage, and the next turn Winota comes down with the mana they have, because they drew Ancient Tomb, even though they have no cards in hand. So fortunately I do have the answer here, and because I kept that Mountain, I can play my Disruption, which is going to be a Feed the Swarm, a painful. This is like me discarding 4 cards, right, because of Necro. Boof, I just got domed for 4. And then Vandal Blasting away their treasure token. And now I just have to hope that they don't find a land Winota, But if they do, that I find somewhere in these cards here, either a tutor or some removal. But if you noticed, we tutored through the deck and saw that most of my win conditions were gone, but most of my removal was left. So I'm banking on that. And at 10 life, I kind of have to. So please just don't hit your land drop for a turn, opponents. But if they do, look, I did draw a Rampage. And opponent bricks. So all that setup and play now rewarded. Let's get the GPS down before I swing. This way, if there's some kind of like flash creature here, I'll at least know about it. Okay, good stuff. Nothing came down. And now I'm feeling pretty good, right? I have a deflecting SWAT. Unfortunately, there is no other target. So if my opponent has exactly like a Vandal Blast that they can play on the Godpharaoh statue, I currently have no way to swat it to anything else. But outside of that, you know, I've got answers. Where was that swat when I was getting strip mined and wastelanded, right? Opponent can only play 1 or 0 casting cost at the moment. And with Dust Bowl off the top, well, from the Necro, I get to Dust Bowl away their tomb, and then they can't play anything at all. If they find a land, they could then play 0 drops from there. So, awesome. Close game, tight match. Managed to beat my opponent, who said that they were an old school player from like 30 years back, but new to Magic Online, not new to Magic at all. And I think that's super awesome, and it's nice to see another old school player online. So welcome to the party here. Hopefully you are watching this or watch this one day. And they were a very good spirit, very good sport about it. So that is that. And then finally, I believe that was game 3. Yeah, so those were my 3 games. So unfortunately, you didn't get to see the Beseech in action, but we did get to see some of the other tricks that the deck can pull off. And yeah, very exciting. I guess if you're not familiar with why Tainted Pact is in the deck, it is essentially a very ugly demonic tutor that randomly just kills your opponent when you have Lelia out. Because each exile is its own independent event, Lelia triggers for every time that you flip a card with Pact. So it actually causes her to be lethal. The other trick you can do with Lelia is you can Necro, and it's like Channel Fireball. So each time you set a card aside for 1 life, she gets +1/+1. And then if for some reason, let's say I'm at 20 and my opponent's at 30. So let's say I Necro for like 15 and I attack my opponent with, or say, I don't know, 13 right there, right? Or 12. So Lelia gets +12/+12, so it's a 14/14. I attack, it exiles a card, so it's a 15/15. So my opponent who's at 30 would now drop to 15. And then I would get all those cards in hand, and then I would discard because I over-necroed, and Lelia would grow a second time. All those cards would go to my discard pile and then get exiled by Necro, and it would grow a second time. So you can actually have less life than your opponent and very quickly surpass them in damage. So it's also a combo with Necropotence. I just thought I'd point out why Pact was in the deck instead of just being the Dreadbore that I removed it for. That's why it's replaced with Pact. Plus, you'll find, obviously, having a tutor, even if it's a bad tutor, right? But having that feature is frequently more valuable than having removal, unless removal is precisely what you need, but it isn't always. Sometimes you need mana, sometimes you need, whatever. So anyway, that's it for the deck. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.